Admiral Kim Dae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth turn slowly below them. The blue and green planet looked peaceful in the morning light. It was the year 2387, and humanity had built 12 colonies across different star systems. Today was special. Today they would meet the Zephyrians for the first time. "Sir, the alien ships are approaching on schedule," said Captain Lee Soo-jin from her station. She looked excited. Everyone did. After centuries of wondering if humans were alone in the universe, they finally had their answer. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful. They moved through space like silver birds, their hulls shining in the sunlight. The aliens inside had contacted Earth 3 months ago. They spoke of friendship, of sharing knowledge, of trade between their peoples. They seemed kind and wise, much older than humanity. Lieutenant Park Min-ho was working at the communications desk. "The Zephyrian leader wants to tour our farming colonies," he reported. "They say our food production methods are very interesting to them." Dae-ho smiled. Humanity had worked hard to feed their growing population across 12 worlds. If the Zephyrians wanted to learn from them, that seemed like a good start to their friendship. "Tell them they are welcome to visit any of our worlds," he said. On the planet's surface, Commander Han Ji-woo was preparing for the alien visitors at the Seoul spaceport. Thousands of people had gathered to see the Zephyrians. Children held signs welcoming their new friends. News cameras were everywhere. The whole world was watching. The first Zephyrian shuttle landed at exactly noon. The aliens who came out were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They wore simple white robes and moved with smooth, careful steps. Their leader spoke through a translation device. "We are happy to meet the humans," the alien said. "Your species shows great promise. We would like to learn more about your worlds and your people." Over the next few days, Zephyrian ships visited all 12 human colonies. They asked many questions about human technology, about their defenses, about how many people lived on each world. The humans answered happily. They wanted to be good hosts to their new friends. Captain Yoo Hai-in was commanding the space station above Mars when she noticed something strange. "The Zephyrian ships are all moving into position around our major planets," she told her crew. "But they said they were just here for cultural exchange." Her worry grew when she saw that the alien ships had their weapon systems powered up. She tried to contact Earth, but her communications were being blocked. Something was very wrong. On Earth, the Zephyrian leader was giving a speech to the United Nations. "Humanity has great potential," he said. "We believe your species can serve a greater purpose in our empire." Before anyone could ask what he meant, the attack began. Zephyrian ships that had been hiding their true nature suddenly dropped their peaceful disguise. Weapons that had been hidden inside their hulls came online. Within minutes, orbital defense. Stations around Earth were burning wreckage. The attack was perfectly coordinated. Every human world was hit at the same time. The aliens had spent weeks learning about human defenses, and now they used that knowledge to destroy them. Lieutenant Park Min-ho's voice crackled over the emergency channel from Luna Base. "Zephyrian ground forces are landing. They're not taking prisoners. They're harvesting people like crops. All human colonies prepare for..." The transmission cut to static. Commander Han Ji-woo watched in horror as Zephyrian ships destroyed Seoul from orbit. Massive energy beams turned entire city blocks into glass. Millions of people died in seconds. He ran to his emergency shuttle, knowing he had to save who he could. Above Mars, Captain Yoo Hai-in managed to evacuate 3,000 civilians from the research stations. Her small fleet of mining ships and cargo haulers was all that remained of the Mars Defense Force. "We have to run," she told her people. "There's nothing we can do here." The same scene played out across human space. A few lucky survivors escaped in whatever ships they could find. Most did not. In less than a week, human civilization was gone. Admiral Kim Dae-ho's flagship was one of the last to fall. Surrounded by Zephyrian warships, he sent out a final message. "This is Admiral Dae-ho to any human still alive. Remember what they did to us. Remember Earth. Remember our people. Survive and remember." The Zephyrians were efficient. They cataloged human technology, stripped the colonies of useful resources, and divided human territory among their client species. In their official records, they listed humanity as harvested species 4847 and marked them as extinct. Of Earth's 8 billion people, perhaps 50,000 had escaped into deep space. They were scattered, broken, and alone in the dark between stars. The Zephyrians thought they were gone forever. They were wrong. In the cold emptiness of space, the survivors gathered their few remaining ships together. They were no longer citizens of Earth or any human colony. They were something new now. They called themselves the Remnant, and they had only one purpose left: to remember, to survive, and someday, to return. 300 years had passed since the day Earth burned. Captain Yu Hei-in floated through the corridors of the deep space vessel Remembrance, checking on her people. The ship was carved from a hollow asteroid, hidden in the empty space between star systems where no one would ever think to look. "How are the children doing today?" she asked Commander Shin Bo-ra, who was watching over the education center. "They all passed their memory tests," Bo-ra replied with pride. "Little Kim Min-soo can name every human colony that was destroyed. Park Aera knows the technical details of every Zephyrian weapon. They're learning well." The children of the Remnant grew up differently than human children once did on Earth. Instead of fairy tales, they learned the names of the dead worlds. Instead of games, they practiced hiding and fighting. Every child could tell you exactly what the Zephyrians had done to humanity and why they must never be allowed to do it again. Engineer. Oh Tai-kyung was working in the deep engine rooms tending to machines that the old Earth scientists could never have imagined. The Remnant had learned to harvest energy from the quantum foam itself, pulling power from the empty space around them. Their technology had grown far beyond what humanity once knew. "The new stealth coating is ready for testing," Tae-kyung reported to the captain. "If this works, we'll be completely invisible to their sensors. They'll never see us coming." The Remnant lived differently than their ancestors had. They had no planets, no cities, no fixed homes. Their entire civilization existed in ships that drifted through the dark spaces between stars. They grew their food in artificial gardens, recycled every drop of water, and made sure nothing was ever wasted. Young Lieutenant Choi Na-ri was preparing for her first infiltration mission. She had spent her whole life training for this moment. "I've memorized all the Zephyrian customs," she told her instructor. "I know their language perfectly. I can pass as one of their servant species." The instructor, an older woman named Captain Bae Jun-seo, nodded approvingly. "Remember, your job is to watch and learn. Don't take any risks. We need information more than we need revenge. That will come later." For 3 centuries, the Remnant had been sending their best people to infiltrate Zephyrian space. They worked as mechanics, traders, and servants. The Zephyrians never suspected that these quiet workers were actually human survivors, studying their masters and preparing for the day of reckoning. Meanwhile, far away on the Zephyrian homeworld, Fleet Admiral Zethkar was reviewing his empire's status reports. The hegemony now controlled 300 star systems. Dozens of alien species paid tribute to their Zephyrian masters. Life was good for the ruling class. "Any security concerns to report?" Zethkar asked his aide. "Nothing significant, Admiral. Some minor equipment failures in the outer sectors, but our technical teams are handling them. All vassal species remain loyal and productive. The Zephyrians had grown comfortable in their power. They ruled their empire from beautiful palace worlds, never imagining that danger could come from the empty spaces they ignored. Why would they worry about darkness between stars? Nothing lived out there." Back on the Remembrance, the daily ceremony was beginning. Every human ship in the Remnant fleet would participate at the same time, no matter how far apart they were, scattered. Captain Yu Hei-in stood before the memorial wall, where the names of the lost worlds were carved in metal. "We remember Earth," she said, and her crew repeated the words. "We remember Mars Colony," she continued. "We remember Mars Colony," they replied. "We remember New Sol Station. We remember New Sol Station." The ceremony went on for an hour, listing every human settlement that had been destroyed. At the end, they spoke the oath that every human child learned as soon as they could talk. "We are the remnant," they said together. "We carry the memory of our people. We will not forget. We will not forgive, we will return." In the ship's workshop, Master Engineer Park Sung-ho was teaching young people how to build the weapons they would need. These weren't the simple guns and missiles that humans had used centuries ago. These were quantum disruptors, matter conversion, bombs, and stealth technology that could make entire fleets invisible. "The Zephyrians think they know everything about warfare," Sung-ho told his students, "but they stopped learning after they became the strongest. We never stopped learning, we never stopped preparing." The remnant had changed in ways their ancestors never could have imagined. They were no longer the peaceful farmers and explorers who had first reached for the stars. Centuries of exile had forged them into something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Commander Han Ji-woo, now an old man, worked in the intelligence center where all the information from their spies was collected. Maps showed Zephyrian fleet positions. Charts tracked their supply lines. Files contained detailed reports on their weapons and defenses. "They've grown weak," he told the younger officers. "They rely too much on their vassal species to do the real work. Their own people have forgotten how to fight real wars. When the time comes, they won't be ready for us." The time was coming soon. 300 years of preparation were almost complete. The remnant had ships hidden throughout the galaxy. They had weapons the Zephyrians couldn't imagine. Most importantly, they had something their enemies had lost long ago, a reason to fight that burned brighter than any star. The children who had escaped Earth's destruction were now ancient, but their descendants remembered everything. Lieutenant Choi Nari adjusted her fake identification badge as she walked through the corridors of Zephyrian Fleet Command. To everyone around her, she looked like just another maintenance worker from one of the servant species. Her skin had been modified to look pale green, and she wore the simple gray uniform that all technical staff used. Nobody paid attention to maintenance workers. That was exactly what she was counting on. "System diagnostic complete on level 7, she reported into her communicator, speaking in the servant language that the Zephyrians barely bothered to learn. What she was really doing was mapping their entire computer network, finding every weakness and recording every security code. Nari had been born on one of the remnant ships 30 years ago. She had trained her entire life for this mission. For the past 5 years, she had been working inside Zephyrian space, moving from station to station, always watching and learning. The Zephyrians never suspected anything. How could they? Humanity was extinct. Everyone knew that. 3 sectors away, Captain Bae Junseo was having similar success on a trading station. He had been posing as a cargo handler for 2 years, learning the schedules of every supply convoy that moved through Zephyrian space. "The ammunition shipment for the 4th Fleet arrives next Tuesday," he transmitted to his hidden ship using a coded frequency. "Security will be light, just 6 escort vessels." The message traveled through space to reach Commander Park Hyun-woo, who was waiting with a small attack squadron in a dark nebula. His ships had been hiding there for months, completely invisible to Zephyrian sensors. "Confirmed," Hyun-woo replied. "We'll be ready." But the remnant wasn't just gathering information. They were also beginning to act. On Kepler Station, the main power grid suffered a mysterious failure that shut down half the base for 6 hours. The Zephyrian engineers couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. The system had simply turned itself off. What they didn't know was that engineer Oh Tae-kyung had spent 3 months carefully installing tiny devices throughout their power network. With the press of a button from his hidden ship, he could make any Zephyrian facility go dark. "Phase 1 is complete," he reported to his superiors. "I can shut down their defenses whenever you give the order." Similar sabotage was happening across Zephyrian space. Communication arrays developed strange glitches that made messages arrive scrambled or not at all. Automated cargo systems began routing supplies to empty space. Weapon targeting computers started giving incorrect readings during practice exercises. The Zephyrians noticed these problems, but they thought they were just equipment failures. Their technology was old, and sometimes old machines broke down. They ordered repairs and replacements, never realizing that the problems were being caused on purpose. Lieutenant Commander Lim Da-yoon, was working on the most important mission of all. She had infiltrated the central data archives on Zephyr Prime, itself, the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. For 6 months, she had been copying their most secret files. "I have the complete records of their military strength," she transmitted during her scheduled check-in. "Fleet positions, weapon inventories, defense plans for all major worlds. I also found something else." The something else was evidence of planned harvests. The Zephyrians weren't done destroying species. They had a list of 12 more civilizations they planned to attack and enslave over the next century. Some were species that currently served the hegemony as willing allies, unaware of their planned fate. Back in the dark between stars, Admiral Kim So-hyun studied these intelligence reports aboard her flagship. She was the daughter of the admiral who had died defending Earth 3 centuries ago. Like all children of the remnant, she had grown up with the weight of her people's history on her shoulders. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered her communications officer. "Send the packages to all designated recipients." Across Zephyrian space, members of the vassal species began receiving anonymous data transmissions. The messages contained detailed evidence of Zephyrian plans to harvest their populations. They showed secret communications between hegemony leaders discussing which species to destroy next. They revealed the true fate of civilizations that had supposedly joined the empire willingly. Centuries ago, the effect was immediate. On 12 different worlds, protests began against Zephyrian rule. Some vassal species started refusing to pay their tribute. Others began secretly arming themselves. On Rigel Prime, the local governor contacted his Zephyrian overseers in panic. "The entire population is calling for independence," he reported. "They have evidence that you plan to harvest them next year. Is this true?" The Zephyrian administrator was confused. How could these primitive aliens have access to classified information? "Ignore their concerns," he ordered. "Increase security patrols and arrest the protest leaders." But the protests were spreading. What had started as isolated incidents was becoming a galaxy-wide rebellion. Strategic analyst Mordak was one of the few Zephyrians smart enough to see the pattern. He studied reports from across the Empire and realized that these weren't random equipment failures or coincidental uprisings. "Someone is coordinating these attacks," he warned his superiors during an emergency meeting. "The timing is too perfect. The intelligence leaks are too precise. We're under assault by an organized enemy." Fleet Admiral Zethkar laughed at the suggestion. "Organized enemy? Who could possibly threaten the hegemony? We've ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years." "I don't know who," Mordak replied grimly. "But they know everything about us and we know nothing about them. They move like ghosts through our systems, striking without being seen. Unknown to the Zephyrians, their ghosts were very real, and they were just getting started." The first open attack came without warning. Commander Park Hyun-woo's squadron, decloaked at the edge of Kepler Station, their ships appearing like deadly shadows against the stars. The Zephyrian 4th Fleet was docked for repairs, their crews relaxed and unprepared. "All ships weapons free," Hyun-woo ordered calmly. "Remember what they did to Earth." The battle lasted exactly 6 minutes. Human ships moved with precision that the Zephyrians had never seen before. Their weapons cut through enemy shields like paper. When the shooting stopped, 37 Zephyrian warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and metal. Only one enemy vessel survived, and that was on purpose. Lieutenant Kim Min-ho opened a communication channel to the damaged Zephyrian cruiser. "This message is for your leaders," he said clearly. "Tell them that humanity has returned. Tell them we remember everything they did to us. Tell them their time is over." The damaged ship limped away toward Zephyr Prime, carrying news that would shake the Empire to its core. Meanwhile, across Zephyrian space, the rebellion was spreading like wildfire. Sergeant Lim Dayun's intelligence packages had reached every vassal species in the Empire. The evidence of planned harvest was undeniable. On Altair 7, Governor Kethrin called an emergency session of the Planetary Council. "The humans have given us proof," he announced, holding up a data crystal. "The Zephyrians plan to harvest our population next year. We have no choice but to fight." The Altarian Defense Force, which had served the hegemony faithfully for centuries, turned their weapons against their former masters. Other worlds quickly followed. The Rigel colonies declared independence. The mining worlds of the Centauri sector stopped sending tribute shipments. In his hidden command ship, Admiral Kim So-hyun watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. "How many systems are in open revolt?" she asked her intelligence officer. 43 and counting, Captain Yu Hyen replied. "The Zephyrians are sending fleets to put down the rebellions, but that's exactly what we want. They're spreading their forces thin." The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. For 3 centuries, the Remnant had studied Zephyrian tactics. They knew their enemies relied on fear and overwhelming force to control their empire. But what happened when that empire turned against itself? Engineer Oh Tae-kyung was monitoring Zephyrian communications from his stealth ship near their main supply depot. "They're recalling the 5th and 7th fleets to deal with the Altarian uprising," he reported. "That leaves the northern sectors with minimal defense." "Perfect," So-hyun replied. "Signal the Wolfpack squadrons. Begin the hunt." Across the galaxy, small groups of human ships began striking at isolated Zephyrian outposts. They attacked supply, convoys, destroyed communication relays, and eliminated patrol vessels. Each strike was swift and precise, leaving no survivors to report what they had seen. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting a war unlike anything in their history. Their enemies appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating effectiveness, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Worse, they couldn't tell if they were fighting one enemy or many. Fleet Admiral Zethkar paced nervously in his command center on Zephyr Prime. Reports of attacks were coming in from every sector of the Empire. "How many rebel species are we dealing with?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," his aide replied. "The attacks show different tactical signatures. Some use weapons we've never seen before. Others appear to be using our own technology against us." What Zethkar didn't know was that many of the rebel attacks were actually being carried out by human infiltrators who had spent decades learning to operate Zephyrian equipment. The Remnant was making it look like the entire empire was collapsing. From within, Captain Bae Junseo had taken control of a Zephyrian destroyer by simply walking onto the bridge during a shift change. The crew assumed he was a replacement officer from headquarters. By the time they realized their mistake, Junseo had locked down the ship's systems and turned its weapons on nearby Zephyrian vessels. "This is easier than we expected," he reported to his handlers. "They're so arrogant that they don't even check identification properly." The real shock came when the first major human fleet revealed itself. Admiral Lee Do-hyun's task force decloaked at the edge of the Vega system, where a Zephyrian supply base was protected by only a light garrison. The enemy commander tried to negotiate. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves. This is Zephyrian territory under the protection of the hegemony." Do-hyun's response was broadcast on all frequencies so that every Zephyrian in the system could hear. "This is Admiral Lee Do-hyun of the Human Remnant. We are the species you thought you had destroyed 300 years ago. We survived, we remember, and we have come home to collect what you owe us." The Zephyrian ships tried to fight, but they were using 300-year-old tactics against an enemy that had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Human weapons, powered by quantum technology the Zephyrians couldn't understand, tore through their shields and armor. When the battle ended, the entire Zephyrian force was destroyed. But more importantly, the message had been sent. Across the Empire, communication networks carried the news that humanity still existed and was back for revenge. On Zephyr Prime, strategic analyst Mordak finally had his answer to the question that had been troubling him for months. "Sir," he told Fleet Admiral Zethkar, "we're not fighting rebels or equipment failures. We're fighting the humans. They're alive, and they're destroying our empire." Zethkar's face went pale. "That's impossible. We harvested them completely. There were no survivors." "Apparently," Mordak said grimly, "we were wrong." The final assault on Zephyr Prime began at dawn. Admiral Kim So-hyun stood on the bridge of her flagship Eternal Memory, watching as hundreds of human ships dropped out of hyperspace around the Zephyrian homeworld. 3 centuries of preparation had led to this moment. All fleets report ready, her communications officer announced. Stealth systems are active. The enemy doesn't know we're here yet. So-hyun looked at the blue-green planet below. It was beautiful, just like Earth had been. Billions of Zephyrians lived on that world going about their daily lives, unaware that their empire was about to end. Remember, she told her fleet commanders, we are not like them. We do not harvest innocent people. Military targets only. Give civilian populations a chance to surrender. The attack was surgical in its precision. Human ships appeared around every Zephyrian military base, space station, and orbital defense platform simultaneously. The enemy had no time to coordinate a response. Within hours, the entire Zephyrian fleet was either destroyed or surrendering. Captain Seo Min-ah led the boarding parties that captured the main government complex. Her soldiers moved through the ancient halls where Zephyrian emperors had ruled for over 1,000 years. The walls were covered with murals showing their conquests, including a small painting of Earth's destruction. The current emperor, Zethkar the Magnificent, was found cowering in his throne room with his advisors. These were the beings who had casually ordered the extinction of humanity 3 centuries ago. Now they trembled before human soldiers. You were supposed to be extinct, Zethkar whispered, his voice shaking with fear. We got better, Mina replied coldly. Admiral So-hyun arrived at the throne room an hour later. She looked at the Zephyrian leaders who had once seemed so powerful and terrible. Now they just looked like frightened old aliens who had finally met something stronger than themselves. You have 2 choices, she announced. Accept exile to the edge of the galaxy, where you will live under human supervision, or face the same fate you gave to humanity. Choose now. The Zephyrians chose exile. It wasn't even a difficult decision. Across the Empire, similar scenes played out on every major world. Zephyrian military forces surrendered, rather than face the terrifying efficiency of human weapons. The vassal species who had rebelled were declaring their independence and offering to help the humans hunt down any remaining Zephyrian holdouts. Engineer Park Sung-ho was working on converting the former Imperial shipyards into schools and hospitals. We'll need teachers, he told his team. The younger generations need to learn what really happened here. We can't let them forget. Commander Yoon Jae-min was establishing new governments on the liberated worlds. Each species would rule itself, but they would all work together to make sure nothing like the Zephyrian Empire could ever rise again. What about the humans? Asked Governor Kethron of Altair 7. Will you take over the Empire now? Jae-min shook his head. We didn't fight this war to become conquerors. We fought it to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. But the hardest part was still to come. After 3 centuries of exile, humanity had to decide what they wanted to be next. They had spent so long focused on survival and revenge that many didn't know how to live for anything else. Lieutenant Choi Nari, who had spent years infiltrating Zephyrian society, found herself struggling with peacetime. I was trained to be a spy and a warrior, she told her counselor. What am I supposed to do now that the war is over? Whatever you want, the counselor replied. That's what freedom means. Admiral Lee Do-hyun stood in the ruins of what had once been Seoul, on the surface of Earth. The cities were gone, replaced by forests and grasslands. The oceans had changed color, but it was still home. The first civilian colonists are arriving next week, his aide reported. They want to rebuild the old cities exactly as they were. Do-hyun shook his head. No, we're not the same people who lived here before. We shouldn't try to recreate the past. Let's build something new. The rebuilding would take generations. Earth needed new cities, new farms, new schools. The other human worlds that had been destroyed needed to be resettled. There were thousands of former Zephyrian worlds that needed new governments. Captain Yu Hyen was teaching history at the new academy on Mars. Her students were children from dozens of different species, all learning together about the wars that had shaped their galaxy. Why did the Zephyrians think they could get away with harvesting other species? One young student asked. Because they forgot that every species has the right to exist, Hyen replied. They thought being strong meant they could do whatever they wanted. But strength without wisdom is just destruction. The memorial to the lost worlds was built on a moon orbiting Earth. It listed the names of every human settlement that had been destroyed, and every person who had died in the harvest, but it also contained a promise for the future. "We remember the past so we can build a better tomorrow," the inscription read. "We are the guardians now. We will protect the innocent. We will never let this happen again." The age of exile was over. The age of remembrance had begun, and humanity, changed by centuries of loss and hardship, stood ready to make sure that no species would ever again face the darkness that had once consumed them. The galaxy was free. The price had been paid. Now came the harder task of learning how to live in peace.